Okay, so let's talk about colonial America as it's been established and some of the economic system between colonial America and the British, which is going to lead to problems later on that are going to arise with the Revolutionary War. Okay, so the economic system that was going on at this time was called mercantilism. It's a set of ideas about the world economy and how it works. Okay, so mercantilists believed that a country's wealth was measured by the amount of gold and silver that it possessed. They believed that having a greater number of exports and imports would result in more gold and silver flowing into the country. Okay, mercantilists also believed that a country should establish colonies in order to be self-sufficient in raw materials. So the home country would then sell its manufactured goods to the colonies. Oh, I was off a little bit there. Okay, sorry about that. So when King Charles II assumed the throne, he was determined to generate wealth by regulating trade in the American colonies. Parliament passed the Navigation Act of 1660, which required all goods imported or exported from the colonies to be transported on English ships. The act also listed specific raw materials that colonies could sell only to England. The list included most of the products that were profitable for the colonies. Parliament passed another Navigation Act in 1663. The law required all goods imported by the colonies to come through England. Merchants who were bringing goods to the colonies had to stop in England, pay taxes, and then ship the goods out on English ships. The practice generated money for England, but it increased the prices of goods in the colonies. The Navigation Acts, they angered colonial merchants who in most cases broke the new laws. English officials discovered that merchants in Massachusetts ignored the Navigation Acts and smuggled their goods to Europe, the Caribbean, and Africa. King Charles II responded to Massachusetts' refusal to observe the laws by withdrawing the colony's charter and making it a royal colony. King James II, who succeeded Charles to the throne, merged Plymouth and Rhode Island with Massachusetts to create a royal province called the Dominion of New England. Connecticut, New Jersey, and later New York also became part of this dominion. The king abolished the colonial assemblies and appointed the province's governors and councilors. Sir Edmund Andros was appointed the first governor. His harsh rule angered nearly everyone in New England. Okay, so you can see now that people in New England in that area are getting a little fed up with the king and how they're doing things, okay? So one of the things that we're going to talk about next is the Glorious Revolution that takes place in England. And the main reason why is because it talks about a fellow named John Locke. Okay, so you have a kind of a revolution taking place in England at this time. People are upset with the throne. But we want to talk about John Locke, who was a political philosopher at the time dealing with the Enlightenment. Okay, so he wrote a book entitled Two Treatises of Government. In the book, Locke asserts that all people were born with natural rights, including the right to life, liberty, and property. Locke believed that people created governments to protect these rights. In return, the people agreed to obey the government's laws. Okay. Locke also asserted that if a government violated people's rights, the people were justified in changing the government. Locke's theory greatly influenced the American colonists, so much so it'll lead to, it's well written, documented in the Declaration of Independence, which we talked about last year in world history. So other than John Locke, how does the Enlightenment affect the United States and the Great Awakening in the North American colonies? Okay, so the Enlightenment was a European cultural movement. It challenged traditional views of the social order. Enlightenment thinkers believed that people should use reason and natural law to shape society. John Locke was one of these influential writers. He argued that all people had rights and that society could improve through experience and education. All right, so many American colonists in the 1700s went to revivals that stressed piety and emotional union with God. This revival of religious feelings became known as the Great Awakening. Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield were two important preachers during this time. The Great Awakening had a great impact on the southern colonies and was especially appealing to backcountry and tenant farmers and to enslaved Africans. Okay, so we're now going to jump forward in time after the Great Awakening, and we're up to about the 1750s. Okay, we're getting close to the American Revolution, but we have to talk about the French and Indian War. And this was a conflict between the French and English over dominance in Europe in the late 1600s and 1700s. It finally spilled over into the Americas. In the 1740s, you have a common interest in the Ohio River Valley led to tensions between the French and the British. Both sides began building forts to claim the territory. George Washington, who first appears at this time in American history, was asked to intervene with the British and expel the French from Fort Duquesne. The American troops started toward the Ohio River in the spring of 1754, and after a brief battle, Washington and his army had to surrender. The British government suggested that the American colonies form an alliance with the Iroquois because they controlled western New York. So during a meeting called the Albany Conference, the Iroquois agreed to remain neutral, and the colonists agreed that Britain should name one supreme commander of all the British troops in the colonies. The conference issued the Albany Plan of Union, which was the first suggestion that the colonies unite to form a federal government. The British commander in chief was General Edward Braddock, who appointed George Washington to serve as his aide. French and Native American forces ambushed British troops in a battle, and Washington's leadership saved the British from disaster at this time. For the next 2 years, the French and Indian War was fought on the frontier. Okay, so in 1756, fighting between Britain and France spread to Europe and became known as the 7 Years' War. Battles were waged around the globe. It's kind of like one of the very first world wars. The turning point of the war in North America occurred with a British victory at Quebec. And eventually, the war kind of drags on for a little bit, but the Treaty of Paris is signed, and it ends the war in 1763, and for the most part, eliminated French power in North America. Okay, that concludes our third video in this series of videos, and you will have a short quiz over that, 1 or 2 questions, and we will talk about it in class. All right, thank you. Bye.